Well, good morning, everybody. This is Robert Phoenix, broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg. So I'm wearing my sort of French-style cap today in honor of the French people. Viva la France, the place of my birth, where the people decided that they were going to take to the streets and basically not have their government tell them what to do. They got pissed off over a fuel tax, a crippling fuel tax. And we're going to talk about that today and why it's an important event and why we need to pay attention to what's happening in France. It's kind of a big deal. Now, we can't get overexcited about it because on some level, it sends an alarm. Hey, Shari, it sends an alarm to sort of the rest of the globalist frenzy out there that people are waking up. We're waking up. That's what's happening. I know it's a radical concept, and I'm going to talk about sort of again. Hi, Natasha. I'm going to talk about why people are waking up and why it's important, and just give you look who's here today. It's the Rose. Just give you some kind of boots on the ground facts. And we're going to get into some astrology today, too. So I'm not sure how long we're going to go. I want it to be kind of short and not really short, but, focused, concentrated, on point. I think that's the plan for today. So I'm just going to wait for a little while, wait for people to come in and hang out and sort of gather together for our morning hour of power coffee, power tea, whatever it is that you bring to the show as your beverage of choice. Hi, Justice. Morning, Cato. Now, the difference between Rosie's interaction and Jasper's interaction in the show is quite interesting. So, for instance, Jasper will put himself right in the screen and want to be a part of the action. Rosie, on the other hand, likes to lay across the computer and make her presence felt on the keys, so to speak. Good morning, Ani. So that's the difference. If you're wondering if there is a difference between the two of them, yes, there is. Absolutely is. So we're going to get into this subject, which is a very interesting one. And in some ways, it even dovetails with what's going on in this country and Trump, and why I think Trump was placed. So there are two. So we have to take into account that the people that are running the show have incredible computing power at their disposal, and probably have quantum computing, which is serious. I mean, really serious computing power. And hey, Justice, there she and Ani. Okay, you're just saying hi to each other. That's great. People say hi to each other in the chat room. You see, if you're part of this morning experience, there are people that show up every single day, and they get to kind of know each other in the chat room, and it's kind of a cool thing. So if you want to have kind of a sense of being a part of something, and the people in the chat room are really cool. I know. Where is Judy? Good question. She's usually like the first to show up. This is kind of a cool little community to be a part of in a lot of ways. So tell your friends, have them subscribe and ring the bell is what they do. That's the protocol. So I'm just, kind of letting this simmer. The first few minutes of the show, we kind of simmer. I kind of talk. I kind of wait for people to show up, and then we jump into things. We jump into it. What else? We're going to talk a little bit about Trump today. There's Rhonda. Good morning. Where's Jasper? Jasper is playing the role of Rosie this morning. Usually Rosie is like on a chair next to me, and Jasper's up here. Today we have, hi, Edgardo. Today we have Rosie. Rosie's not as popular in some ways as Jasper. So there she is. She's much more malleable than Jasper in a lot of ways. See that? Okay. So she's the stand-in today, or the lay-in, since she lays across the keyboard. That's her calling card. Jasper likes to get his face right into the camera. That's his thing. Rosie, let me tell you something about Rosie before we jump in. Rosie is vicious. She may look like a really sweet, pretty little cat, but she is vicious. She's a hunter. Jasper outweighs her by about, I don't know, maybe 10 pounds. And she has no problem putting Jasper on his back. Seriously, she's vicious. She's totally vicious. And I won't even tell you what she's done to my social life. It's not good. All right, shall we get into this today? I think we've got 25 people. I think we've hit a bit of a critical mass. So why don't we jump into what's happening in France? This is really interesting. So Macron on the orders, right? So Macron doesn't do anything on his own. He doesn't do anything on his own. Jasper looks like a Maine Coon. Rosie is a, what do you call these? Calico. Rosie's a calico. Maine Coons are big. They're big cats. And Jasper's a tabby. He's an orange tabby. So we have the calico and the tabby in the house. Yeah. Mars Chiron conjunction on New Year's Eve. Yeah, right. That's true. Could be very revolutionary. Good point, Justice. Mars Chiron conjunction. I was talking with Regina yesterday, and we're going to have our show on, I think, the 14th or 15th of December. So we did an hour yesterday. And we talked about what's going on kind of around the world with this true node in Cancer. And one of the things that has been really coming through with this true node in Cancer is this move towards, nationalism, populism. And it sounds like a dirty word, but we're seeing this now really start to take hold. It's a kind of a big deal, right? So first of all, what we saw in Italy was we saw Salvini basically, take charge. The Italians have said enough, right? Enough. We're Italians first and Europeans probably second. The French tried this, and I think that was an election that probably was rigged. Although when I looked at her chart, Le Pen did not look like a winner in her chart. I'm sorry, she didn't look like a winner. But we're seeing this all across Europe now. We have Orban in Hungary and a lot of the Balkan states. They're just shutting down immigration. Poland is shutting down immigration, and there's actually a boycott now. The UN has this new migration pact that they want to introduce, and basically say, well, these are the standards that are going to be set. And it's not really set in stone. Oh, famous last words, right? It's always set in stone. Always set in stone. You say, oh no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It won't really affect you. And of course, it winds up affecting people. So what's happening now? We have countries. I almost said companies, which is kind of true. We have countries in Europe that are boycotting this migrant compact forum. This attempt to pass this UN resolution. Countries in Europe are not attending. I mean, this is a big deal. This is a really, really big deal. And, we're seeing this pushback on, and it's interesting because it does have to do with borders, and it does have to do with the inclusion, and the insertion of people from other countries and cultures at a very rapid rate into countries that may not really be able to accept them or assimilate them. And that's really what's happening. The rate of assimilation is a mutation. It's a mutation. It's like it's almost like a tumor, right? When it happens so quickly, the social conditions metastasize, and it becomes very, very difficult for people to integrate into this new system. They don't want to, right? They don't want to integrate into the new system. They just, if you look at it from their perspective, they're coming out of their world, their experience, their culture, whatever rules or non-rules they've had in their culture, and they don't want to discontinue them. especially when they're brought in at a significant number. What they want to do is they want to consolidate so they can continue to have their culture inside a new culture that they're living in. They don't want to. And in some ways, to be quite honest with you, I really don't blame them. You know, it's like, I mean, if the option is, hey, look, you can come to this country, you can basically run your own, old program and get compensated for it. Why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you want to have that? Oh, great. So we could just basically, relocate, I don't know, Darfur or someplace like that, Darfur, into Germany. Why wouldn't you want that? Because everything supports that kind of movement, right? You get to keep your own language, keep your own food theoretically, or maybe not food, but it's like, why? And so from the other side, you're looking at these people coming in and it's like, well, why aren't they integrated? Why aren't they getting jobs? Why aren't they, abiding by the rules of our country? Why are their social customs so much different than ours, and how come they can't adapt? The reason is because there's numbers. There's numbers. If you sliced immigration by, say, I don't know, 85%, you'd have a very, very different kind of outcome. You'd have people gradually assimilating into the culture, and next thing you know, they become part of the culture. It's when the numbers are skewed, and when there's obviously kind of an over amplification, right? An over amplification of that process. That's when it gets really tricky and difficult. So now what you have in Europe, you have people pushing back. They're pushing back. They were like, okay, we took some people in, and now it's like, we've taken all we can and we can't take anymore. We can't take anymore. And they're pushing back on the UN now. They're not attending this United Nations migrant, forum where they want to pass this thing. This is significant. It's really significant. And this leads into the discussion around the French. Now, I talked a little bit about this yesterday, and the French are people that have a culture. They have a culture, and their culture basically, I don't know how fine they are with their, with the modification of their culture. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I was born in France, but I'm not French by blood. I don't know, how far they can be pushed, but I think they probably reached, their event horizon. I think they've reached the point where they're pushing back. Now, why did they push back? Well, they pushed back not necessarily because there has been a rush and an influx of migrants into their country, and for a while. I think that might have been part of it. That might have been kind of an underlying cause. They pushed back because Macron was given orders to implement a crippling fuel tax. Now, this is, a lot of these are test cases and test balloons, right? They set up these test balloons to see, what'll happen. And Macron was an accountant for the Rothschilds, and he was basically put into office by the Rothschilds, who've had a very, very strong hold in France for centuries now. Okay, so he's taking orders from them. And the whole idea with what was going on with this fuel tax is that it supports global warming, right? It's a tax on being able to drive a car. It's a tax on being able to drive a truck. It's a tax on being able to drive a truck that has fuel. We saw the same thing happen in Brazil. People in Brazil went nuts. The country went on a massive strike when they raised the fuel costs. And the fuel costs were impeding truck drivers, independent truck drivers, from actually making money at their jobs. So we're at a nexus point here because this global faction wants to bring us into a new world order. And the new world order is roughly based on climate change, right? We're going to implement rules. We're going to implement taxes. We're going to implement these ideas, regulations, stipulations that we have to do these things in order for the planet to survive. And that's coming from a top-down perspective. That's a top-down imperative. And as a result of that, people wind up, giving up their freedoms to a large extent. The freedom to move about, with their cars, which is kind of a big deal. And some people may poo-poo that, but it's kind of a big deal actually. So what happened in France, and that's just one freedom. There are other freedoms that are associated with this as well. So what happened in France now was that the people said, we can't, France is a heavy socialized country. And I know people that moved out of France because they couldn't afford the taxes. I remember being on a plane with this woman. We were flying out of the south of France, and we were actually headed to Schiphol in Holland, right? And when I was talking to her, she was living in the south of. You could tell she was probably part of, the 1% or maybe the top 5%. And she moved to California, because she couldn't afford the taxes. The French are already heavily taxed in order to support their socialized system. The French are socialists, and they have been for a very long time, post World War II, right? That's when, in fact, most of Europe became socialized post World War II. So what happened now, though, is this onerous fuel tax was passed, or at least it was trying to. Macron was saying, here's what you're going to have to pay for fuel now. And people went nuts. They went nuts. And by the way, revolution is in the French blood. We've seen this a number of times with the French, for better or for worse. The French Revolution was another event that was ginned up by the Rothschilds. I mean, they did it basically to eliminate their competition. And they had Robespierre as their executionary agent, right? That's what happened during the French Revolution. Vive la France was really kind of a call for the Rothschilds. Vive la Rothschild, so we can eliminate the wealthy, the people that might be a threat, to our burgeoning hegemony. So that's really what happened during the French Revolution. I mean, the spirit was okay, but the execution, literally and figuratively, favored the ruling class, and not just the ruling class in general, but one real strong family, very strong family of the ruling class. And we saw in the 1960s that there was, revolution, the revolutionary spirit in the streets of Paris. We saw this around the world, but Paris and the French they're good. They're good at revolution. That's what they do. So for better or worse. So what we saw was the beginning of a revolution. Like things up until today, and I'm not sure what's going to happen after today, but things were getting very heavy, very, very heavy in France. Like, Macron had a moment, I think it was either yesterday or 2 days ago, where the entire fire brigade that was representing, this is an elite fire brigade, turned their backs on Macron. Turned their backs on him. I mean, he was shunned. He was absolutely shunned, which is the worst thing you can do to a person, is to shun them. And the people had had enough. And so they donned these yellow vests and they burned things. They were spraying graffiti. I'm not a huge fan of that, but they were getting their point across. And what did Macron do? Well, he rescinded the fuel tax. He blinked. Now, he said, we're going to put a 6-month moratorium on this, meaning that they're not going to try to pass this thing again for another 6 months. So what will that do? What will the French do? What will Macron do? Because the French army was not going to fire on the French people. They will not. They won't. They will not fire on the French people. The French connection to their culture, their heritage, their blood is thicker than this synthetic fluid that the Rothschilds and the Dr. Frankensteins of the New World Order want to pump into their system. It's not going to work. But I'll tell you what they'll do. Macron and the people inside the government will take 6 months, and they will wind up training a paramilitary force that is not comprised of French soldiers. This is what's going to happen. They'll take the North Africans, they'll take anybody, there's all these migrants now that are sitting around on the streets. Now, this would be a great opportunity for Macron to get them off the streets and take them out somewhere, maybe into the Pyrenees or someplace like that, and train them. And to train a paramilitary force of about 3,000 people. And then, if they have to, deploy them in a situation where they will fire on the French people. I would say that they would probably wind up doing that. And if you were Macron, why wouldn't you do that? because you're not, number one, your quote unquote legacy, whatever that is now, needs to be sort of intact and addressed. And number two, he's taking orders. He's taking orders from the hive mind, right? The Rothschilds, right? So he's got to do this. He's got to protect this. This is a temporary loss and a temporary setback for this push towards a new world order. Plain and simple. If the French had taken that tax laying down and said, okay, great. Well, let's just do this now in Spain. Let's just do this now in Italy. Let's do this now in England. And we've seen what happens in England when the fuel taxes go up. The British go nuts. You have taxi cab drivers who have very serious clout still, unlike this country, where taxi cab drivers have lost any kind of clout to Uber and Lyft drivers. But that's a different story. So this is a big deal. Okay, now I want to bring this into some astrological context, because we're in this phase right now where the true node has moved into Cancer. And that was a Cancerian move. So on the south node, we have Capricorn. And what I talked about with Regina and what I've talked about on this show is we're looking at the diminishing returns and the diminishing inputs of the corporocratic state and the oligarchic systems that Capricorn represents. It's in decline. That's the nature of the south node. And with the true node in Cancer, what's rising is a connection to emotional content, things with continuity, things with consistency, things that have some kind of emotional merits, mending, sewing, protecting. It's folk. Cancer is folk. Capricorn is not folk. Capricorn is urban. Capricorn is about ascent. Capricorn is about the corporate bottom line. That's not to say that there aren't good things about Capricorn. I'm just talking about this polarity right now. So what we're seeing really early on is the disparity in the polarity. We're seeing what's happening, and it's actually very interesting. I think it's very interesting. Now, I wanted to look up, right now we've got the true node at 28, Cancer. I wanted to look at the Sabian symbol. This is a very interesting Sabian symbol for this time. And the Sabian symbol, this is great. I love it. It's actually, we're at Cancer 27. That's where we are right now. And the Sabian symbol for Cancer 27 is this: a violent storm in a canyon filled with expensive homes. Let me read this to you again. A violent storm in a canyon filled with expensive homes. This is the Rudyard interpretation. Keynotes: a confrontation with a social upheaval demanding the reconsideration of static values. Let me read that to you again. A confrontation with a social upheaval demanding the reconsideration of static values. Here's what Rudyard has to say. The deeper implications of the scene depicted in the symbol are that the socio-cultural elite can always see its position and security challenged by forces beyond its control, even if it may be successful in protecting itself from destruction. Bam! What did we just see? What did we just see in France? Okay? What did we just see? It's exactly what we saw. And they protected themselves briefly by rescinding this tax for 6 months. Now, the people will remember this moment. They'll remember this moment, and they'll say, guess what? We won. We got over on Macron. We got over on these fat cats that are running our government. Now, that's a bit of a victory, and they'll do it again. They will do it again because they saw that they were successful. Now, what Macron and what his inner circle will do in order to counter effect that or create a countermeasure, well, I just gave you one possible scenario. Let me continue to read. The individual may not be able to depend on the standards and values he has acquired through education and through a relatively sheltered and rich life. He has to rise to the occasion and perhaps undergo an inner metamorphosis as a result of the crisis he has been able to accept as a personal challenge. The contrast between the two phases of this 24th sequence is evident. Peace and luxury and intellectual development in terms of collective cultural values, reading books. It goes back to the saving symbol number 24, which I'll read you. Then the challenge to meet a crisis situation produced by uncontrollable karmic forces that could lead to a successful catharsis. Cancer 26 is guests are reading in the library of a luxurious home. And this is great. I love this stuff, man. So Rudyard talks about the transference of social privilege to the level of intellectual enjoyment. So we've seen this with French culture. It's a very intellectual culture. The French prize their ability to indulge in the mind and, indulge in cinema, indulge in musique concrète. I'm going to read this. So this is prior, this is 26. This is leading up to a violent storm in a canyon filled with expensive homes. So Rudyard says, we now see the concretization of cultural excellence and wealth at the level which individuals can exercise their developmental capacities in comfort. The process is individualized because the library belongs to a private residence, the luxury of which implies an individual's concentration upon the acquisition of wealth. This scene shows the result of such a concentration, including the acquisition of friends who can relax in and enjoy intellectual pursuits. This is the first phase of the 24th fivefold sequence, which here begins and will end on a note of social opulence and prestige. We're not dealing now with leaders in the intellectual community, but with wealthy guests who apparently seek to improve their minds or to keep up with the intellectual trends of the time, thus maintaining class standards of information. What is at stake here is the need to conform to the requirements of one's social status. And then we go to Cancer 27, and bam, a violent storm in a canyon filled with expensive homes. So there's this peak that takes place in some ways with Cancer 26. And then in Cancer 27, there was catharsis. Cancer 28 is very interesting. An Indian girl introduces her white lover to her symbol tribe. That's very interesting. And I'll leave that symbol for another time. But this is a fascinating period that we're in. Now, I've talked about the fourth turning and how Strauss and Howe talk about the fourth turning when there is a collapse of these corporocratic, oligarchic systems. There's a collapse. We're seeing this now because what they want to do is they want to change the system. They want to create more hegemony and control, and they want to use the planet as a point of leverage in order to do that. And no matter how invested people are in the future, right? Because this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to get people invested in the future. People are trying to eke out an existence in the now. The only way that they can, I think, create a transition to a new world order is not by threatening people's existence and imposing a type of austerity that they have to bend to because morally it makes sense. The moral justification becomes an algorithm that people can kind of accept. No, if they want to do this, they have to be able to promise people some level of prosperity through this process so that they can say, okay, nothing's going to change. Our lives aren't going to change. We're going to be able to, continue to move about freely. We're going to be able to do the things that we've come to know, love, and enjoy. Maybe we'll accept this new model of government because you're not forcing us to, give up things or, have our status in the now threatened. Maybe they understand that now. Maybe they're going to come up with a different model. Maybe there's going to be a lot of perks that they'll build into sort of this version of a global governance. So enough people will say, I'm in, I'll take that. But the way they're doing it now is not going to work. And I'm sure they're kind of understanding this. So this is a very interesting time. And I want to salute the French people for getting off their asses and buying some yellow vests and making a nuisance of themselves. I think it's great. I think it's great. Now, in this country, we've had our own version of this. Make America great again. But here's the deal. Trump is he's a hard cat to wrap your head around in a lot of ways, because there are things about Trump that are reprehensible. It's like his support of bin Salman, reprehensible, and the Saudis. They're good people. He basically said, look, our friends, our best friends in the Middle East need the Saudis. He said that. Says they need them. So the connection between the Saudis and our best friends in the Middle East are clear. In fact, they go back a long ways. They're very clear. Okay. So he's basically having this kind of, Uranus Gemini moment where he's telling us this is it. This is what's going on. This is why the relationship exists. Why we honor the relationship. We're honoring the relationship in as much as we can get cheap oil prices, in as much as our good friend in the Middle East needs these people. Symbiotic relationship, hand in glove, right? So that's what Trump does. He'll do this every now and then. He'll tell something that is quite real. And if people are paying attention, they'll see it. On the other hand, he's still continuing to sell arms to the Saudis so they can go in and wipe out Yemen and just create, an apocalyptic scenario, for the Yemenite people, because the Saudis don't like him. They want their resources, whatever their reasons. I think it's about resources, to be honest with you, because I think the Saudis have been pumping. Oil is abiotic. It's always being created. This whole idea that a bunch of dinosaurs died. I mean, think about this just for a second, right? Maybe it's the vegetation too, whatever. But it's like, fossil fuels. They call it fossil fuels for a reason. Plants didn't leave, fossilized remains unless it was kind of embedded in a rock or something. They're basically saying, all these dinosaurs died. It was their bones. It was their skeletal structure. It was their skin. It was their ligaments. It was their tendons that became the basis for all this oil. Think about how many fucking dinosaurs had to be on the planet. Just think about that for a moment. We've been pumping the shit out of the planet since what? The 1920s, right? 1920s is when all the big pumping really, like the late teens, early 20s. It was starting in this country, to be honest with you. It was starting in places like Ohio, where they're actually pumping oil. This is where the Rockefellers started to make their money. So as a result of this, we've had all these, fossil fuel. No, it's not fossil fuel. The planet is always creating oil. It's always creating oil. It's what it does, right? Oil is the lubricant. It's the lubricant for the entire planet. It's the lubricant for the plates, the tectonic plates of the planet. And when you're a country like Saudi Arabia, and you go into a production cycle where you're pumping, which is what they've been doing. Basically Obama said, pump like crazy. Let's flood the market with Saudi oil, and let's basically, torpedo Texan oil, New Mexican oil, Arizona oil, Alaskan oil, because that's what happened. When the Saudi, there was so much oil that they couldn't even bring it in a timely basis to process it. They had tankers lined up for miles. The refineries couldn't handle the amount of oil that was coming into the country. And that was clearly a strategy on Obama's part to paralyze the national economy and to paralyze the economy of places like Texas. And look, we can get into the weeds around fracking and the dangers of fracking and all that stuff. And we could have a whole discussion about that, right? We get into free energy and the replacement of oil. That could be a whole other show. But we're dealing with like the here and now and trying to, have this system on some level begin to make some kind of sense, right? So if that's what he was doing, it was impacting people's lives, putting people out of work. Yeah, did the fat cats lose some money? Sure, but there were a lot of other lives that were impacted by what Obama was doing. So when we get into this hyper production cycle, Saudi Arabia, which they're in now, by the way, Trump has basically said, look, you guys need to pump your ass off. By the way, we're going to continue to pump here and we're going to bring oil prices down. So oil prices are down. They're down. That's the one thing in this country that keeps people from rioting, which we saw in France. You raise the price of gas. If gasoline was $5 a gallon here, I guarantee you people would storm the streets of Washington, D.C., just like they stormed the streets of Paris. It's one of those things that's a pacifier. It's a petroleum pacifier. But Saudi Arabia, based on its cycle of pumping, they've overtapped their ability to kind of maintain these levels, which is why they've got Yemen in their crosshairs. They want to go into Yemen and they want to take over Yemen essentially, and they want to pump out of Yemen. They want to continue to expand their petroleum empire and their ability to stay relevant. Because I'm telling you right now, if the Saudis ever lost the ability to pump oil and bring it to the world, they would be so irrelevant like that, and the world wouldn't put up with them at all. Would it impact, the world and its production of oil and petroleum and cars and trucks and commerce? I don't really think so. There's plenty of oil on this planet. Now, to the extent that it actually impacts the planet, that's a whole different discussion. But what we saw in Paris coincides with this fourth turning, because we're seeing these structures begin to shake, rattle, and roll. This is the tectonic moment of what we would call the kind of the oligarchic, corporatocratic, old school, old rule reach. Now, of course, the elites have a backup plan. And the backup plan is socialism. And it's like, okay. Capitalism thing doesn't work. You're tired of government overreach. You're tired of these corporations that summarily rule your lives. We've got another plan in place, because they always want to herd people, right? They always want to herd people. So, okay. Socialism thing sounds good. Do we get cheap gas? Do we get to continue to play video games and have cheap cable TV? Oh, okay, great. I'll sign off on that. Okay, but I wanted to talk about Trump, because I kind of got caught off on a little bit of a tangent there. But Trump is, okay. Is Trump a Judas goat? Is he a Judas goat? What is a Judas goat? A Judas goat is a goat that has been bred to lead other goats to slaughter. Is that the role that Trump is playing? Is this whole MAGA experience just kind of one big kind of mind control or mind fuck, a social program, right? Is this part of leading the herd into this? Because quite frankly, we saw what happened in 2016, and it even happened during the midterms. There was a lot of, I think, look, we can look at the midterms in a couple different ways. We saw the midterms motivate the left in a way that we haven't seen them be motivated in a long time. And I don't care if it's red or blue or left and right, it represents the people. It's a particular faction, right? It's a particular voice with particular values, but they were motivated. Just like the right was motivated in 2016, and I think was still motivated in 2018. And so what we saw, during that time was the final degrees of the, Trudeau and Leon on election night, flipped. Trudeau went into cancer. And so, is Trump that? Is he here because they have known that this uprising is coming for a long time. They've known it. They've modeled this thing out. And so what you want, like, how would the world react if this uprising or this cry for populism, this cry for nationalism, this cry for, hey, we're individuals, don't forget about us. We have a voice, we have values, and we want these values to be respected. We want these values to, take root again. Who would be better to kind of lead that charge? Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? Hillary Clinton couldn't do it. She couldn't. Maybe she played the role of insulting Trump's base enough to push people over to Trump. I'm just thinking a bit outside the box here. When Hillary Clinton called Trump's base a basket of deplorables, she lost the election. She lost the election there. If there were women that were on the fence with her, or even men for that matter, that were like, okay, well, when she said that, when she put her foot in the mouth, 40% of his base, that's what she said, are a basket of deplorables. That's when she lost the election. It wasn't the Podesta emails. It wasn't Russian bots or Russian influence. It was when she made that statement, because it was a polarizing statement and pushed people further into Trump's camp. Right? If you're somebody who has even a modicum of consciousness and awareness, and you're thinking, well, gosh, he's from New York. He's a real estate mogul. He's made a lot of money. I don't know. He's been married a few times, but he keeps coming out with this populist rhetoric. And then you've got Hillary, who you think, well, gee, she comes from the Clintons, and she's got some experience in government. She is a woman. You're kind of on the fence, and bam, you're called a basket. You could be part of one of the deplorables in her basket or the basket. What are you going to do? You're going to go over here. It was a very polarizing statement. But this is really what was happening during that time. People were rising up. Look, I'll tell you right now, I believe that in the second election that Obama had against Mitt Romney, I believe that Obama probably lost that election. That there was a lot of vote gerrymandering going around, that there was things that were happening. Right. I don't want to go back into it too much, but if I spent an entire show, I could probably demonstrate that the votes were tweaked during that election. And I'm not a Mitt Romney fan by any stretch. I think the man probably does belong in a basket of deplorables, but a different basket, right? And they knew, they've been watching this unrest. They know where things are going. They know where things are moving. They know where it's like even Obama in a lot of ways was a populist choice. He was a populist choice. Yes, he checked all these boxes. If you're an American and you voted for Obama, you felt good. You felt good. It's like, yeah, man, I elected the first black president. I feel good about that. It's a major virtue signal. And he was up against the fossil known as John McCain. And Obama was, young and charismatic and said the right things. Of course, everything he said was a lie. I'm going to close Gitmo. I'm going to get us out of Iraq and the Middle East. You'll be able to keep your own provider. All that stuff. He was, he was a liar through and through. Most politicians are, by the way. That's kind of what they have to do. They're professional liars on a number of different levels, even if it's like the lies of omission, right? It takes place anyway. So they knew this populist trend was coming, and Trump is a perfect person in a lot of ways. Now, here's the deal with Trump. Just when you think you've nailed him, you said, oh, he's a gatekeeper. Oh, he's a Judas goat. He'll do something that is like completely kind of, off script. Completely off script. Like, of all the countries that are supposed to meet at this next version of the climate accord, Trump's not going to be there. So you have to ask yourself, well, where is he in this mix? And that's where we get into his sun sign, that Sun-Uranus conjunction. He's hard to handle. Trump is hard to handle. And I don't know. I think he's in trouble. I think Trump is in trouble. I was watching briefly yesterday. I was watching Mike Pence give a eulogy for George H.W. Bush. It was Mike Pence. It wasn't Donald Trump. It was Mike Pence. Mike Pence is vice president. Mike Pence in that moment, for all intents and purposes, was acting very presidential. But he's another phony in a line of phonies. you know, lauding George H.W. Bush and the letter that he sent his son. I mean, the bullshit was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. I think Trump is in trouble. And I think that moment yesterday where Mike Pence was eulogizing 41 was, it was intentional. But here's the other thing with Trump. Just when you think you've got him cornered, just when you think he's in the crosshairs, he manages to get out of it, and some other kind of scenario or reality takes place. Now, Rush Limbaugh made an assertion that the Republicans are now going to join with the Democrats to impeach Trump. He said this. Fox News recently said that Mueller's got damning evidence on Trump now. Even Fox News is starting to turn on Trump a little bit. This is going to be very interesting to watch. And if Trump is impeached, if this does happen, I will go on the record and I will say that the United States will turn to Paris in the streets. It's going to happen. Because inasmuch as Trump has created kind of this intense antipathy with the left and the media, he's also created a great deal of loyalty with his base. And if his base believes that Trump has been unfairly removed from office, there'll be riots in the streets. Absolutely riots in the streets. We'll see Paris here in the United States. It will take that in order for something to kind of foment. We're at a very critical point here with the True Node. Very critical. It's just going to last a few days, but I'm telling you, man, I'm telling you, we can see it. We can see it from the Sabian symbol. I'll just read it again. I'll read this Sabian symbol again. Here it is. A violent storm in the canyon filled with expensive homes. Keynote, a confrontation with the social upheaval demanding the reconsideration of static values. Catharsis. Catharsis. So with the nodes here, they head backwards. So the next stop is going to be the guests are reading in the library of a luxurious home. And then Cancer 25, a willful man is overshadowed by a descent of superior power. Ooh, that's real interesting. These degrees, these last degrees of Cancer are fascinating. 24, a woman and two men castaways on a small island of the South Seas. That's creating community and interdependence. Cancer 23, meeting of a literary society, intellectualization. Cancer 22, a young woman awaiting a sailboat, expectancy. Cancer 21, a famous singer is proving her virtuosity during an operatic performance. Excellence. Excellence. So this is fascinating. There's a lot of water imagery with Cancer. High degree of water imagery. Zero Cancer is an interesting, this is what my Sabian symbol is. Zero Cancer is the culmination. This is a really important symbol to wrap your head around. Of course, it's going to be one. Let me just see here. Hold on. Well, Rudyard has this as 30 Gemini, but I think of it as really zero Cancer. Right. So I'm going to read this to you. Where'd it go? Hold on. Let me find this thing. Okay, so this is 0 going to 1. This is where it all culminates. This is where the True Node culminates. In a year and a half, on a ship, the sailors lower an old flag and raise a new one. A radical change of allegiance exteriorized in a symbolical act, a point of no return. We're headed towards this. This is the Sabian symbol we're headed towards, is 1 Cancer. This is what Rudyard says. A radical change of allegiance, exteriorized in a symbolical act, a point of no return. We have now reached a square 90-degree angle to the beginning of the cyclic process, meaning 1 Aries. This is a moment of crisis, a sharp turning point. In the zodiacal cycle at the summer solstice, the northward motion of the sun in decimation stops. The sun rises and sets far north of exact east and west as it can during the year's cycle. Its motion is now reversed. Slowly, the sunset points move southward on the western horizon, and the length of the day decreases. In the lunation cycle, from new moon to new moon, this is the first quarter phase. On the ship, which symbolizes the ego consciousness floating, as it were, on the sea of the vast unconscious, the individualized will makes a basic decision. The dominant yang force allows the yin force to begin a 6-month-long rise to power. The collective will gradually overcomes the individual, and at the end, the state will overpower the person. Now, however, the individual enjoys his most glorious hour. He exults in his ability to make a free decision, to act as an individual who selects his life goal and allegiance. This is the first stage of the 19th fivefold sequence of degree symbols. In a decisive act, heavy with consequences, the symbolic college youth might realize that he should bring to an end his quest for the ideal companion and enter into matrimony. He ascends to the possibility of progeny, of home responsibility. His consciousness accepts a process of fundamental reorientation, implying the stabilization of his energies. So it's about one phase ending and a new phase beginning. A new flag is being raised. So this is where the true node in Cancer is headed. 1 degree on a ship of sail. On the ship, sailors lowered old flag and raised a new one. That happened, by the way, during the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. It was the sailors. It was the sailors who started that revolution. It was the Russian Navy. All right, let me get into the chat room here, see where everybody is. Do you think expensive homes in the valley reps the Southern Cali fires? Could be. Could be. I thought about that. Could be the tyranny of the name. Okay, what else do we have? The owl's third eye. Yeah, the owl has reached illumination. Have you noticed that? The owl has reached illumination. It's just one cycle. It's at the red phase, so it's just being activated. The owl will go through different phases of illumination over the course of the next couple of weeks. Trump lives up to his name, the ultimate Trump card. Yeah, absolutely. It's like you can't. Every time you think you've got Trump handled, or you've got an idea or some kind of ultimate statement around Trump, it gets obliterated. Something else happens, right? My hat collection. This is a funny hat. I bought it for my kid at one point in time. He was playing Orville Wright in a school presentation. What else do we have here? Proud to say I've never voted. How can somebody outside of me represent me? It's true. It's true. I've only voted 2 times. I voted this last election. I'm not afraid to say that. And the reason why I voted for this last election was because I became aware of activist judges, and we have them up the wazoo. I mean, up the wazoo in this part of Texas. When I saw one in action, I just wanted to vote against her, just on principle. That's one of the reasons why I voted this. And it's been a long time. Last time I voted was 1980. St. Augustine has 3 organic farmers markets, also selling homemade cheeses and bread. One-stop shopping. Yep. Ask yourself this: what comes after Trump? Well, I hope it's not Pence. Pence is a nightmare. I mean, Pence is just a complete nightmare. He'll do anything. Trump won't do anything. He won't. Trump is hard to handle. He'll capitulate, but he doesn't go into capitulation for long, which is fascinating about Trump. Like, he'll say something like what he did with Putin. And he said, yeah, let's get together. Let's meet. Let's talk. I think we have an opportunity to build a bridge between these 2 countries. And everybody's calling him a traitor, and everybody's saying that he should be hung for treason and all that stuff. And he has to come back and read a script and recant what he said. But he doesn't stay there for long. He comes right back out a few days or a few weeks later, and he's spitting fire again. So they've tried to put him in his place a couple of times. Oh yeah, we're going to get out of whatchamacallit. God, I'm having a blank now. Just drawing a blank. Assad's country, right? Sorry. So we're going to get out of there. And of course, they've got that phony little gas thing that the white hats put together. And he's got to, recant and capitulate, right? So, but even when these things happen, he comes back out and he's just hard to handle. I'm not sure what comes after Trump. Trump 2, maybe. Trump 2. He's got to make it through this period. If he makes it through this period, and I talked about this on the Sunday night show. If he makes it through this period, which is really the gauntlet, this next 6 months is really the gauntlet for Trump in terms of potentially being impeached, because now the House has the numbers. And if the Republicans flip on him, he's going to be really on thin ice. But if he makes it through this time, I believe he will get elected to another term. So he's got the next 6 to 8 months. And if he makes it through, so we'd have to go to, 2024 to see what's after Trump. I don't know. It's going to be interesting for sure. It's a long way to go between now and 2024. We still got to get through the Pluto-Saturn conjunction in 2020, and that may just be a complete time bomb for everything. What comes after that for the rest of the world. Let's see, what do we have here? Trump did not speak at McCain's funeral either. Yeah, he's working that newsboy cap. It suits me. It's funny. Let's see, what else do we have? Norman Vincent Peale had a big influence on his thinking. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Norman Vincent Peale was Trump's first spiritual teacher, and Norman Vincent Peale was about how to think positive and influence people. He was really positive affirmation guy. There's some information, of course, that Norman Vincent Peale was also a Freemason. He presided over Trump's first wedding with Ivanka. So he plays a huge role in Trump's life. The people that are really important in Trump's life are Norman Vincent Peale, Roy Cohn, Liberace, his father. Those are like 4 of the big people in his life. What a rogues gallery, right? Liberace, Roy Cohn, Norman Vincent Peale, and his dad. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. He may get sick and tired of the bullshit and decide not to run. How he deals with all this is amazing. I know, right? I mean, think of this. I mean, this guy, it takes heaping piles of bullshit every single day. I think he's probably maybe the most hated man in modern American history. Who is more hated than Trump? Maybe Richard Nixon. I think Nixon might be close. Even Johnson didn't have the same kind of revulsion that people, kept percolating for Nixon. I don't know if there's anybody else who was more hated. Anybody in the chat room? Is there anybody in the chat room? And Trump's brother. That's true. Trump's brother did influence him. He influenced him in a different kind of way. He was not a living influence, but an influence in mortality. I think that's part of Trump's Pluto in his 12th house. I think there's more to that Pluto as well. I don't know if there's any other modern figure that's more reviled than Trump. Charles Manson, Jim Jones. I mean, think about that. We're having a dialogue about the President of the United States in terms of his lack of popularity or revilement. Hillary comes close. Yes. I would say yes. Hillary's probably very close. I think we can boil it down to Hillary, Nixon, Manson, Jim Jones, Donald Trump. Right? Can we think of anybody else? Is there anybody else that could be reviled? I think that's it. And think about that. He's got to live with that every single day. Not only that, but he's got all these witches doing spells and stuff on him every day, right? So there are supernatural forces at work. Hitler's not American, though. I'm just talking about Americans. The fates are on Trump's side. George Bush, no, I don't. I disagree with that. I don't think George Bush. Look at people today. I mean, they're like, oh, they're falling all over themselves. Oh, he was a great father. He was a great grandfather. He wants to be remembered as a family man. Go listen to Richie Allen's interview with Kathy O'Brien, which just came up, right? Which just came up. George Bush, he was not hated during his time. There are people that, that actually like Bush, believe it or not. And GW Bush comes close. But even look now, oh, he's a painter. Oh, look, he has such a warm and touching relationship with Michelle Obama. Oh, isn't that sweet? They're interesting because she's a Capricorn, whatever Michelle Obama is, but Michelle's a Capricorn and Bush is a Cancer, So they're in this true node, south node dance that's going on. Of course, she does love him. Absolutely. Wonder how deep that love goes. I'm going to get on out of here. Thank you for being a part of today's show, as always. As always. Lori says, she got it. She got it. She totally got it. Hitler and Bush had similar painting styles. Yes. Interesting. Passed down, perhaps. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Hey, listen, I've got some space left for my webinar. So you want to join it. Starts this Saturday. I'm going to go for 3 Saturdays in a row, break for the holidays, and 3 more Saturdays after that. I hate all forms of government. You break the etymology down, linguistics. Government, look, we need to have some level, even if it's at a local level, that we can have a form of collective agreement, whatever that is, and be able to live within the context of that collective agreement. Okay, I think it's important. And that's about as much as I would want. Everything else over and above it. But what's happened now is the beast has become so like intermeshed with everything, with trade rules and trade laws and tariffs, and disassembling that could take generations, unless it happens overnight. What's me today, Robert, plus me? What's me today, Rob? I don't know. All right, hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step what's possible. Vive la France, baby. Vive la France. You stood up, and don't lay down again. 6 months from now, keep your yellow vest in your closet, okay? All right. Have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow.